When we think about Jesus in art, a few familiar images probably come to mind. Jesus teaching his disciples, cradling a lamb as the good shepherd, or seated in majesty as a ruler of heaven. These depictions have shaped how billions of people understand and relate to him, offering a vision of Jesus that is, at its core, comforting and familiar. But what if I told you there was another, much earlier way Jesus was depicted? One that might feel surprising, even strange to our modern eyes. Imagine Jesus not as a shepherd or teacher, but as a miracle worker holding a wand. A wand similar to those seen in depictions of ancient magicians or healers. In the earliest centuries of Christianity, this was how Jesus was often shown in art, performing some of his most iconic miracles. This image of Jesus, so different from the one most of us are familiar with, raises intriguing questions. Why would early Christians depict Jesus this way? What did the wand mean to them? And perhaps most intriguingly, why did this motif vanish from later Christian art, leaving behind the more regal and pastoral images we know today? These questions take us into the heart of early Christianity, a time when the faith was still taking shape in a world steeped in Greco-Roman culture. It was a time when ideas of magic, divine power, and miracle working often overlapped, and the boundaries between them weren't as rigid as they might seem today. The wand, it turns out, is far more than just a visual quirk. It's a window into how the first Christians understood Jesus, his miracles, and their own faith. In this video, we'll explore the fascinating history of this forgotten image of Jesus. We'll look at the art itself, the frescoes, carvings, and mosaics that show Jesus wielding a wand. We'll dive into the debates among art historians about what the wand represents. Is it a staff of authority, a magical tool, or something else entirely? And we'll consider what the disappearance of this imagery tells us about how Christianity evolved, both theologically and culturally. By the end, we'll see how something as seemingly small as a wand can reveal profound insights about the early Christian imagination, the hopes and struggles of ordinary believers, and the tensions that shaped the faith as it grew from a grassroots movement into a global religion. Let's dive in. When we turn to the earliest depictions of Jesus Christ in Christian art, one of the most striking features is the recurring presence of a wand, or perhaps more accurately, a stick in his hand. This motif appears consistently in artwork from the 200s to the 300s CE, during a time when Christianity was still a minority religion adapting to a predominantly Greco-Roman cultural context. But what's especially fascinating is how and when this wand appears. It's never shown in random or decorative contexts. Jesus isn't holding it when he's teaching, baptizing, or acting as the Good Shepherd. Instead, the wand only makes an appearance when Jesus is depicted performing a miracle. This makes it clear that the wand was not a casual artistic choice, but a symbol tied directly to Jesus' role as a miracle worker. Let's start by looking at where we find these images. Some of the earliest examples come from frescoes in the Roman catacombs, those underground burial sites where early Christians left behind some of their most vivid visual expressions of faith. One of the most famous examples is a fresco showing Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead. In this image, Jesus stands before the tomb, his arm extended, holding a slim wand pointed toward Lazarus. The scene is simple and intimate, yet the presence of the wand adds a layer of deliberate symbolism. Other examples show Jesus performing miracles like healing the paralytic. Here Jesus is depicted pointing the wand toward the afflicted man, evoking the moment of transformation and healing. Also turning water into wine, the wand appears as a part of the act, visually emphasizing the miraculous nature of the event. And also multiplying the loaves and fishes, the wand here underscores the divine intervention in an otherwise humble, everyday setting. These images are not rare. In fact, miracle scenes, often featuring the wand, were among the most common subjects in early Christian art, far more so than depictions of Jesus teaching or seated in majesty. This focus on miracles tells us something crucial. For early Christians, Jesus' ability to heal was central to their understanding of his mission and identity. To understand why the wand was used, we need to consider the visual and cultural language of the time. In the ancient Greco-Roman world, wands were not exotic. They were a well-recognized symbol of supernatural power. In Egyptian and Roman art, wands or staffs were often depicted in the hands of figures associated with magic, healing, or divine intervention. This included gods, magicians, and even emperors who were often portrayed as wielding supernatural authority. For early Christians, adopting this imagery wasn't necessarily about copying pagan traditions, but about speaking a visual language their audience would immediately understand. The wand in Jesus' hand marked him as a figure of extraordinary power, someone who could bend the natural order to bring about healing and transformation. It was a way of saying this man is not like us, he is a channel for divine power. At the same time, these images reflect the concerns of ordinary people in the ancient world. Life was harsh, and access to medical care was limited. Miracles like healing the sick or feeding the hungry spoke directly to the needs and hopes of everyday believers. The wand served as a visual shorthand for the miraculous, highlighting Jesus' role as a healer and provider in a way that felt immediate and accessible. What's particularly striking is the centrality of miracles in early Christian art. Unlike later periods where Jesus is often shown enthroned or teaching, the art of this time focuses overwhelmingly on his miracles. But why? Because miracles were a core part of how early Christians understood Jesus' identity. His ability to heal, feed, and raise the dead was not just proof of his divine nature, it was also a source of hope and reassurance in a world filled with suffering and uncertainty. This emphasis on miracles also distinguished early Christian art from its later iterations. By the time Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire, the focus shifted to more imperial imagery, with Jesus depicted as a ruler rather than a humble miracle worker. But in these early pieces, we see a Jesus who is deeply connected to the struggles and needs of ordinary people. The wand in this context is not a symbol of domination or authority, but of compassion and divine intervention. Now that we've established the prevalence and context of the wand in early Christian art, the question remains, what did it mean? Was it simply a tool of divine authority, as some argue, or does it have a deeper connection to the magical traditions of the ancient world? Could it even link Jesus to figures like Moses, creating a bridge between Old Testament prophecy and New Testament fulfillment? Scholars have proposed three main interpretations of the wand, each offering a distinct perspective on how early Christians understood Jesus and his miracles. Let's break down these interpretations and explore the evidence supporting each one. Some scholars, particularly those from Catholic apologetic traditions, argue that the wand is better understood as a staff of authority. According to this interpretation, the wand signifies Jesus' divine power and his unique status as the Son of God. In this view, the wand is not a tool or implement of action, but a symbol of Jesus' inherent authority to command the natural and spiritual realms. Proponents of this interpretation emphasize that Jesus' miracles were not acts of magic but expressions of divine will. The wand, then, is likened to the scepter of a king, a visual marker of his legitimacy and power. By framing the wand as a staff of authority, this view seeks to distinguish Jesus' miracles from the magical practices of the time, which are often viewed with suspicion by Christians. While this interpretation certainly has logic, it is less favored among critical art historians. The imagery of a staff of authority fits better with the imperial depictions of Jesus that emerged in the 4th and 5th centuries rather than the humble, intimate portrayals of Jesus in early Christian art. Additionally, this view often reflects a modern discomfort with the overlap between miracle and magic in ancient contexts, rather than the perspectives of early Christians themselves. The prevailing view among art historians is that the wand in Jesus' hand is, quite simply, a wand. This interpretation places Jesus within the visual and cultural traditions of the ancient world, where wands were commonly associated with figures who wielded supernatural power, including magicians, healers, and even gods. In the Greco-Roman and Near Eastern worlds, wands were widely recognized as symbols of miraculous or magical power. They appear in depictions of Egyptian magicians, Roman rituals, and mythological scenes, where they signify the ability to manipulate reality through divine or mystical means. Thomas F. Mathews in The Clash of the Gods argues that early Christian artists intentionally adopted the imagery of the magic wand to convey Jesus' power in a way that was familiar to their audience. This wasn't an endorsement of magic, but a pragmatic use of cultural symbols to communicate Jesus' miraculous abilities. Jesus himself was accused of being a magician by his critics. The philosopher Celsus, writing in the 2nd century, dismissed Jesus as a mere sorcerer, accusing him of using magical tricks to deceive his followers. The presence of the wand in early art may reflect this cultural tension, simultaneously embracing the visual language of magic while reinterpreting it within a Christian framework. This view suggests that the wand represents Jesus' miraculous power as understood by ordinary believers. Jesus' ability to heal, feed, and protect was deeply resonant. The wand, as a symbol of these abilities, reflected the hopes and needs of a population yearning for divine intervention. The third interpretation sees the wand not as a magical tool, but as a reference to Moses' staff, connecting Jesus to the Old Testament tradition of miracle-working prophets. In this view, the wand underscores Jesus' role as a new Moses, fulfilling and surpassing the miracles of the Hebrew Bible. Moses' staff is a central symbol in the biblical narrative. He uses it to part the Red Sea, bring water from a rock, and perform other miraculous acts. Early Christian art frequently depicts these scenes, sometimes alongside images of Jesus performing miracles with a wand, suggesting a deliberate visual parallel. Proponents of this interpretation point to passages like John 6:32, where Jesus compares himself to Moses. "It was not Moses who gave you bread from heaven, but my Father gives you the true bread from heaven." This suggests that early Christians saw Jesus' miracles as a continuation and fulfillment of the miraculous works of Moses. While the new Moses interpretation has merit, it relies heavily on scriptural parallels that may not have been foremost in the minds of the artists or their audiences. The wand's appearance in scenes that have no obvious connection to Moses, such as the raising of Lazarus, suggests that its meaning was broader and more universal than this interpretation allows. Each interpretation offers valuable insights into the possible meanings of the wand, but the most persuasive view may be the one that acknowledges the cultural context of early Christianity. As Thomas Mathews argues, the wand represents the hopes of a magical healing in the ancient world, when life was harsh and medical options were few. For ordinary Christians, the wand was likely a symbol of divine power expressed through Jesus' miraculous acts, a sign of hope and transformation in a world deeply familiar with the language of magic and healing. The presence of the wand raises another intriguing question. Why did this imagery disappear? Why, after being so prominent in early Christian art, did the depiction of Jesus as a miracle worker with a wand fade away in later centuries? Let's explore how the changing political and theological landscape of the church influenced the evolution of Christian art and how the image of Jesus transformed from a healer to a cosmic ruler. By the 4th century, the image of Jesus with a wand began to fade from Christian art, and by the medieval period it had all but vanished. This raises an important question. Why would such a prominent motif, one so integral to early depictions of Jesus' miracles, disappear? To answer this, we need to look at the broader transformations occurring in Christianity during this period, particularly its relationship with the Roman Empire and its evolving theological priorities. One of the most significant changes in the 4th century was Christianity's transition from a persecuted minority faith to the official religion of the Roman Empire. With the Edict of Milan in 313 CE and Constantine's conversion to Christianity, the Church not only gained legitimacy but also immense political power. This newfound status had profound effects on Christian art. As Christianity aligned itself with the imperial structures of Rome, its visual language began to reflect this shift. Jesus, once depicted as a humble miracle worker, was now portrayed in ways that emphasized his authority and cosmic rule. Images of Jesus seated on a throne, crowned in glory, or surrounded by symbols of divine majesty became dominant. The wand, with its associations with intimacy and miraculous healing, no longer fit the narrative of Jesus as a universal king. The early Christian focus on miracles, healing the sick, feeding the hungry, was rooted in the needs and hopes of ordinary believers. But as Christianity became the religion of the elite, the emphasis shifted to Jesus' divine authority and his role as the ruler of the cosmos. The imagery followed suit, with the wand replaced by symbols of kingship. Another key factor in the disappearance of the wand was the Church's growing concern with distinguishing miracles from magic. In the early centuries, the boundaries between the two were often blurry. Remember that critics like the pagan philosopher Celsus accused Jesus of being a magician, and the use of wands in art may have unintentionally reinforced this association. By the 4th and 5th centuries, church leaders were actively working to distance Christianity from anything that could be construed as magical or superstitious. Augustine of Hippo, for instance, wrote extensively against magic, emphasizing that Christian miracles were acts of God, not the manipulation of supernatural forces by human hands. In this context, the wand, a widely recognized symbol of magical power, became problematic. The Church's theological emphasis on miracles as expressions of God's will, rather than human agency, further marginalized the wand. Visual depictions of Jesus performing miracles with an outstretched hand or through his spoken word better aligned with this doctrinal shift. Another factor in this artistic shift is the changing needs of Christian art by those that wielded it. Depictions of Jesus as a healer gave way to images of Jesus as a judge and ruler, reflecting the Church's role as an institution of power. With its integration into the Roman Empire, Christianity adopted many of the visual conventions of imperial art. The portrayal of Jesus as a miracle-working healer with a wand was gradually replaced by depictions of him as a regal figure, modeled on Roman emperors like Constantine. This shift not only reflected the church's alignment with imperial power, but also helped legitimize its authority in the eyes of the Roman populace. It's also worth noting that the emphasis on miracles in Christian art began to decline in general during this period. While miracles remained a central aspect of Christian theology, their visual representation became less common. By the medieval period, Christian art increasingly focused on the passion and resurrection of Christ. These themes, which emphasize Jesus' suffering and ultimate triumph over death, resonated with the church's evolving theological priorities. The imagery of Jesus' miracles, including the wand, receded into the background. As Christian art became more elaborate, it moved away from the simple, direct depictions of individual miracles that characterized the early period. Instead, it favored grand, multi-panel narratives that placed Jesus' life and mission within a broader theological framework. The wand, as a specific symbol tied to individual miracles, no longer had a place in this more expansive visual language. The disappearance of the wand also raises questions about how cultural memory is shaped and reshaped over time. By the medieval period, the image of Jesus as a miracle worker with a wand had largely faded from the collective Christian consciousness. This was not necessarily a deliberate act of suppression, but rather a gradual process of reinterpretation and prioritization. As the church consolidated its power and doctrine, it naturally emphasized the aspects of Jesus' life and mission that best supported its authority. The humble, intimate images of Jesus performing miracles with a wand may have seemed out of step with this narrative, and over time they were replaced by images that better aligned with the church's vision of itself. Art doesn't just reflect theology, it helps shape it. By shifting the focus of Christian art away from miracles and towards themes of kingship and authority, the church reinforced a specific understanding of Jesus that continues to dominate to this day. The image of Jesus with a wand, once central to early Christian art, faded into obscurity for centuries. It wasn't until the rediscovery of ancient Christian sites, particularly in the 19th and 20th centuries, that this motif began to attract renewed scholarly attention. The modern study of these depictions has provided valuable insights into the diversity of early Christian thought and has challenged long-standing assumptions about how Jesus was understood and represented in the early centuries of the faith. The rediscovery of sites like the Roman catacombs, along with archaeological work in regions with strong early Christian traditions, brought to light a wealth of visual material from the 2nd to 4th centuries. Among these discoveries were frescoes, mosaics, and carvings that prominently featured Jesus performing miracles with a wand. One key site is the Catacomb of Calixtus in Rome, which contains depictions of Jesus raising Lazarus and healing the sick with a wand. Another is early Christian sarcophagi, which often include miracle scenes with Jesus holding a wand as he heals or raises the dead. These artifacts provide an unmediated glimpse into how early Christians visually articulated their faith before the establishment of a dominant, uniform iconography. The rediscovery of Jesus with a wand has forced scholars to grapple with how early Christians viewed miracles and divine power. Far from being a marginal or isolated image, the wand was a central feature in depictions of Jesus' miraculous acts. Modern interpretations have explored what this says about early Christian beliefs, their cultural influences, and their priorities. The use of the wand indicates that early Christians were comfortable borrowing visual and symbolic elements from the Greco-Roman and Near Eastern worlds. This flexibility highlights the adaptive nature of early Christianity as it spread across diverse cultural contexts. The rediscovered wand motif has reignited debates among scholars, particularly concerning how to interpret its significance. While the earlier sections of the video have explored the major historical interpretations, modern scholarship has added nuance to these debates. Scholars like Thomas Mathews argue that the distinctions between magic and miracle in the ancient world was far less rigid than later Christian theology would suggest. The wand in this view reflects a world where divine power and supernatural acts were understood through a shared cultural lens. Critics of this view point to the Church's eventual rejection of magic as evidence that early Christians must have seen the wand differently, perhaps as a symbol of divine authority rather than magical power. Recent studies have emphasized the parallels between the wand in Christian art and its use in depictions of pagan gods, magicians, and healers. For example, representations of Hermes, who often carries a caduceus, or Asclepius, the god of healing, may have influenced early Christian artists. This raises questions about how early Christians navigated the tension between cultural appropriation and the development of a distinct religious identity. Some scholars have suggested that the wand's simplicity made it an ideal symbol for largely illiterate audiences. Its presence in miracle scenes would have immediately conveyed the idea of divine intervention to viewers, even without the need for accompanying text or elaborate theological explanation. The rediscovery of the wand has also challenged modern assumptions about early Christianity. Many contemporary Christians are accustomed to viewing Jesus through the lens of later theological developments, where his miracles are seen as acts of divine grace rather than tools of practical healing. The wand motif highlights the human aspect of Jesus' ministry, focusing on his interactions with ordinary people and their struggles. This challenges the idea of Jesus as a distant imperial figure and brings him closer to the lived experiences of his followers. This image of Jesus with a wand dovetails with ongoing debates about the historical Jesus. Was he primarily a spiritual teacher, a revolutionary, or a healer? The emphasis on miracles in early art suggests that for many of his earliest followers, Jesus' ability to heal and transform lives was his defining characteristic. The rediscovery and study of these images provides a window into the diversity of early Christian thought and practice. They remind us that Christianity in its earliest form was not a monolithic faith, but a dynamic and evolving movement. The wand represented hope in a harsh and unpredictable world. It symbolized the tangible benefits of faith, healing, sustenance, and protection, rather than abstract or theological promises. The use of the wand also shows how Christianity adapted to the cultural and symbolic language of the ancient world, making it accessible and relevant to a diverse audience. The rediscovery of Jesus with a wand has enriched our understanding of early Christianity, highlighting the complexity and creativity of its visual culture, and the ways in which faith has been expressed across time and place. Let me know what you think in the comments. What is the most believable reason for early depictions of Jesus with a wand, and why did the later church remove it entirely? If you enjoyed this video, please remember to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to make sure you don't miss an upload. YouTube, unfortunately, these days doesn't always show us subscribed uploads in our feed, so hitting the notification bell is the best way to not miss a video. As always, thanks for watching, and until next time.